And we're live. Welcome to a virtually connecting discussion of an autumn by an article by, man, this is what I get for practicing. An article by Autumn and Maha titled "A Call for Promoting Ownership, Equity, and Agency in Faculty Development via Connected Learning." I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College. And I'll let the other folks introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Autumn Keynes and I am an instructional designer at the University of Michigan Dearborn, where I just started. That's a brand new position for me. I'm also a co-director, Virtually Connect, co-author of this article, where we talked about the connecting as one of the of connected learning, but we have other examples too, and we have with us today. So I'm learning about this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm Jim Luke. I'm split. I'm economics professor at Lansing Community College, and I am also the Open Learning Faculty Fellow in our Center for Teaching Excellence at Lansing Community College, which is relatively new responsibilities for me, and it has those responsibilities have expanded quite a bit, and the article was very, very timely for me because I've been given responsibility to develop a couple of courses and actually develop a whole strategy on faculty development that and yeah, we definitely need to do this. We've got a couple of people playing around with some different stuff in there, and very, very timely.
I'm Maha Bedi. I'm an associate professor of practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo, and I've been a faculty developer since 2003. And co-author of this article with Autumn, I'm also a co-director of Virtually Connecting, and authoring this article with Autumn in the summer was kind of cathartic for me because having worked in faculty development for a long time and been the most radical person in my department, it felt good to sort of try to bring together all the good practices that we've been seeing and all the different ways that, faculty development could potentially be different, could learn from all these ways of learning that a lot of us here in this room have been learning. And just trying to imagine, I was taking a course on faculty development in the summer and trying to imagine how it could be otherwise, other than the ways that everyone knows and the ways that I think work for some people but don't work for everyone. And the problem is that it's very difficult for me to actually apply this in practice in my own center, in my own department. It's actually very difficult. It's amazing to see how other people responded to the article, and then how it's actually really difficult to get anyone in my department to even read it, or when they read it to even get it. And so to let me even try this stuff. So I'm glad that it inspires other people, and I hope they actually manage to do something with it. I mean, obviously Digpins that Cindy, Dan, Joe, and Autumn do themselves is one of those things that we talk about. But I'm curious how others are seeing that kind of thing.
Hi everyone, my name is LaDonna Minnis. I'm an instructional designer at the University of California, Irvine. I'm currently as part of a team called Design Plus, which is an instructional design shop for the Division of Continuing Education. So this article was really interesting to me because I felt like it was very inclusive of full-time faculty, but also referenced adjunct faculty in some of the comments, and then also even development of graduate students who might be at a different stage of their kind of educator's journey. So I really appreciated that part of this article, and I like thinking about kind of how it changes between full-time faculty versus adjunct throughout the educator's journey is really interesting.
And on that note, my name is Susanna Simmons. I work at Colorado School of Mines in our Teaching and Learning Department. I'm an instructional designer. And I found this article just really refreshing because I have the same struggles as you, Maha, where I'm like, oh, we should do all these things, but what is my sphere of influence? And how do I present it? We have faculty developers now who are really new, and so I want them to get their footing before I show them this article and say, you might want to change everything. So, like there's the kind of some of the practices that they're falling behind. So how do you help your faculty become digitally literate? And so I'm very excited to talk more about this article today.
All right, I think I'm last on the list here. Taylor Kendall, and I have worked in sort of faculty support roles in a few different ways. Early on in a previous life through the Library of Congress, that was sort of more K-12 focused, so got a little of that perspective. And then most recently at Metropolitan State University in Denver. And then just as of basically a week ago, decided to sort of step out of that altogether and just be able to focus more on supporting a lot of this sort of work that I'm really passionate about, and sort of just framing up the future for a lot of faculty that I think are struggling around how to develop, and I mean, if that's the right word, how to just basically future-proof ourselves, knowing that there's a lot of change coming. There's way too much to dig into in Maha and Autumn's work. I know we probably won't hardly scratch the surface here, but excited about the other couple things I'll mention that I assume Suzanne or LaDonna might, but Pedagomy is another group that talk about connecting some groups here. The article came about DigPins and some of the work that is sort of connected within that article. Then we have another community of instructional designers through Pedagomy, started discussing how we might bring some of that work into that group. And then I run a secondary to sort of meet up on my own through just taking design and brought a group together physically and dissected some pieces. And so this is like a multi-pronged, as virtually and interconnected and globally connected as you can get. So, and to me, that's what learning can be. So I'm excited. Thank you guys. I found a better spot where I'm at here, but I think the ambient noise is a little more tolerable.
And I'm Daniel Linz. I'm an instructional designer currently at Davidson College. I've worked in 3 different countries at 4 different universities as an instructional designer. So it's been interesting to see what that's been like over the last 11-ish, 12-ish years. And I only read the article because I was mentioned in it. No, I've Maha and Autumn and a few other people in the virtually connecting scene. I have been parts of other little groups here and there, hybrid pedagogy being one of them. And we've met each other at Digital Pedagogy Lab and Open Ed and stuff. So we've hung out in a lot of different physical places as well as virtual ones. So and the work is always exciting, and I just love working with smart people. So that's why I love working with faculty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sunday Richard. I lead the instructional design team at Davidson College with Daniel. And I think that the article was great in the fact that it brought a lot of things together and put them in one place for us to talk about these things. So nice work on that. Also thinking about just the history of faculty development was a nice way to kind of approach this, and where teaching and where learning fit and where they fit together. So excited I haven't seen the annotation, so that will be future work, but I'm excited to see that.
I kind of thought it was interesting to do the annotation on it because we mentioned marginal syllabus and collaborative annotation in the article, and then to apply annotation to it was interesting because I think in a sense it's not annotating the article was interesting to me to read because it wasn't like there wasn't like controversy with the readers. So I'm imagining that maybe people different from this group might find it controversial. But most of the people reading it were like, yay! So.
I'd be particularly interested in faculty and educators getting in and annotating and seeing what they have to say as well. So hopefully this is a seed that can continue to grow and spread.
Perhaps we need to actively invite people we think don't necessarily agree with that. I'm going to try to do that.
Yeah, this is something that just came up actually both at the meetup we held and then since then You brought up marginal syllabus, and we've got deep connections to Raimi Kalir and folks tied into that. And the biggest thing I struggle with, and honestly, in a lot of ways, what allowed me a lot more flexibility and feeling okay stepping outside of the system that I've been a part of for so long. And I love everything about higher ed, and it's not in any way because I'm sort of fed up with where it's at, but it's also created what feels like a very sort of exclusive in-group sort of environment. And I know that there's a lot of strategies within that article how to bridge appropriately, but even in that sort of connecting and bridging, I feel like I still exist in this. It's not echo chamber is not quite the right word, but it is sort of an exclusive, in the know sort of crowd. And a lot of faculty that I worked with just feel like they don't have any sort of bridge or any way to connect into groups that are exploring the edges of this sort of work. So I'd love to just get thoughts on like how to effectively bridge. Again, we all know each other. We all love the work that's going on. But it'd be great to, we should have 4 or 5 faculty here that have never read it and have no idea how to even approach this work. To start to make some of those connections happen.
One of the questions with this kind of thing that I've always had is, it's one of those things that make no sense to you until you experience it. But why would you go ahead and experience it and take that risk if you don't realize the value of it? And it doesn't start to give dividends until you have a community. And so it takes this patience and a leap of faith, I think, that this will be worth it. And a lot of people don't even want to take that first step. For a lot of people, tweeting is a big deal. Like to put themselves out there is a big deal. I think annotation is maybe, to me, the smallest step. Like, it's not a huge risk. It's something they would do when they read something anyway. I don't know what your experiences are. What helps faculty take that first step? Like even with DigPins, which they know going into it, I still know that not everyone has the same attitude.
Yeah. My faculty did really get annotation when we did DigPins over the summer. With everything else where there was, I think it's the thing that most closely maps to something that they're doing anyway. So it kind of becomes possible to see, oh, well, I annotate things I'm reading. Wouldn't it be interesting if I could see other people's annotations? Wouldn't it be interesting if we could attempt to have a conversation? So they kind of jumped on that. Now, what I have not done is a follow-up study to find out if they're actually using it, today. So that would be a good point of contact. The other ones are hard. The thing, as you were speaking, that you reminded me of is that this is also the core problem of core curriculum or liberal arts or diversification requirements, or however you want to put that it is something that we ask of our students on a regular basis at most institutions. There's some level of take some stuff where it's not immediately apparent what its utility is. Now that's done in a very top-down form, so I don't know that that's something we want to replicate, but it strikes me that that's another chunk of thinking that maybe could be more closely integrated with a very utilitarian approach to faculty development. What's going on in the chat?
There's a lot going on.
Which is great, but really bad for video.
Right.
Yeah, I will say that this is something that came up in the last round, at least with the Davidson group, that we asked students to do some things that or the faculty members themselves were saying, or talking to each other about how they weren't doing the things that they asked their students to do, like take those risks. So I think centering, again, the fact that faculty development is you're back in the learner chair, or does there have to be a line between teaching and learning? Can it be a more fluid line? But again, recognizing ourselves as lifelong learners, as you all pointed out.
I think when you're approaching those institutional kind of policies and barriers that make it hard to create the safe space for educators to feel like they can fail when they're developing a course is really challenging from an instructional design perspective. I try to make sure that when I'm working, because most of the subject matter experts or instructors I work with are industry professionals that maybe don't have a lot of experience teaching. And so I'm kind of guiding them through that process and helping them organize the information and activities that they want to have in their course. And I think just letting them know that teaching is an iterative process and it's okay if their course doesn't go perfectly the first time, and creating that space for them to try something new and not feel that pressure of it being like a perfect course. The first development is important.
We had a provost here a couple of years ago who wanted to codify that for faculty evaluation purposes, and we did not actually follow up on it. But the idea has stuck with me that in a way, faculty members again ought to get the equivalent of the student's withdraw late option, something where they would be able to in some way say, "Yeah, I was trying something different in this course, and maybe it went sideways, or maybe I needed to practice. Maybe I now understand better how I'll do it differently the second time." And I think this is an interesting place where faculty development starts touching other parts of the institution, because people can really buy into, I would love to do these things, but particularly with junior faculty, I hear a lot of, I'm totally going to do that right after I get tenure, which is a neat benefit, except that it costs us 7 years to get there. And it would be interesting if we could find some way to codify that process so that it was not just so the safe environment was not just a supportive network, and maybe not even just a culture, but an actual policy that proves.
So where the institutional structure rewards innovative teaching for tenure, right? And the thing is, I don't like the word innovative teaching because, of course, it can be innovative with bad pedagogy. So what we really want to do, I think, which I'm trying to help out with, is to promote reflective teaching. And then, because that you can ask faculty to reflect at the end of every semester or every year on what they've done and why they're doing it and so on. And one of the things about trying something new is that if you reflect on it constantly with someone, with yourself, but also with others, if something goes wrong, you can catch yourself and get feedback from students and try better and try again next time. Because a lot of times, you try something new for the first time, it's not going to work. It's not going to work perfectly. It's not going to be what you expect it to be. And something that works this semester might not work next semester because the political environment's different, because your students are different, because you are different. But I think the only way to get through that is to reflect all the time. And then if the institution doesn't reward taking risks and then reflecting on them, so people will always get into ruts and just do the same thing to get good student evaluations or whatever it is. And then...
I'm curious, that reminded me of the idea of this sort of double loop learning, and maybe I'm you guys can distinguish that from just like metacognition. I think there's maybe overlap, but they're distinct. I feel like without the institution sort of making a stand and accepting that sort of pushing towards the edges is acceptable and also rewarded in the right way. I still struggle with like practical ways of instilling that idea of whether it's just reflective teaching or double loop learning, which I think goes a little further. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of how to do that in my own life and practice. And I've really worked at it a lot. So I think it's just something that doesn't necessarily come natural. Any thoughts on just like practical strategies to demonstrate the value of constantly being in this, like, yes, I'm teaching and I'm reflecting on that. Oh, but I'm also evolving as an educator and my own pedagogy, and I'm reflecting on that. And there's probably a third level that's like reflecting on my reflection, that's really high level sort of meta thinking. Any practical strategies to like, because I love being in that space, but I naturally sort of, my head's up there anyway. I struggle, and I have for the last couple of years, to like really give these practical strategies of, here it is, this is what it looks like, and this is why it's effective and matters in our practice.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like a lot of the practices that we're advocating for lend them to that, right? So think about like the way Meha blogs, right? I mean, I just feel like she's constantly acting on her purpose. And, you know, sometimes it's directly related to teaching. Sometimes it's related to the way that she's thinking or the different things that she's thinking about. But just being in that process of reflection and putting it out there in the open. I mean, it's very vulnerable to do that, but I think it also holds you accountable in a certain way. And having a community around you that will hold you accountable in a hospitable way and in a kind way, but also not in a like fluffy, we're just gonna, you know, kind of let you do whatever you want kind of way either, right? Like having a real community around you that is, you know, gonna call you on it when you're just fooling yourself, maybe. Yeah, critical friends. Something that I'm getting an opportunity to do in this new position that I'm really excited about is do a midterm evaluation with faculty, where I'm actually going into the classroom and doing a midterm feedback for students. So that way I can kind of go in as this, you know, third party who's outside of the class. I'm not a student, I'm not a faculty member. Faculty member steps outside and I do a consensus building kind of conversation with the students about what's working and what's not working. And then I like create a report on that, do a class observation and do a report on that I give back to the faculty member in the middle of the semester, not the end of the semester when it's too late, right, to do anything, but in the middle of the semester where if there's changes that we can make, then we can go ahead and we can make those. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that resonate with me.
If I could, I think this is related. I hope maybe I'm not taking it in a different direction, the conversation in a different direction, but I want to share part of what was giant aha moments for me reading the paper, and extremely timely and very useful. But first as background, yeah, I've got this split role now, but despite the fact that I guess suppose you have to say I'm a faculty developer now, you know, my identity is still, you know, I'm econ prof. I'm an economics professor. So I'm at that end of it. Anyway, a big part, and right now I have an assignment to lead a project. In a few months, we're going to launch a like a 6-day over 3 months. It's all real fuzzy right now. Chief Diversity Officer, Associate Provost wants this big thing that has to do with UDL and inclusion and all this kind of stuff, and it's a hybrid format, and they just want it. And so it's like, how do we do this? And I'm going, you know, I'm the one sitting going, oh, sure, we can do this. So I was reading this, and one of the things everybody's been pushing was, oh, we got to have some money, we got to bring some speakers in, we got to do all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, reading this article, the click for me was, and we've talked in our own Center for Teaching Excellence now, we need to ban the word training. Everything, our administration, everybody, and even faculty have said, oh, I need training on this or that. And it's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're educating educators. That's it. We're not doing training. You know, it's like the old you know, the analogy. You want sex education or you want sex training? But so I carried that out, and I was thinking, wait a minute, you know, because I know all these great voices. I was thinking, oh God, we could do this course. We could get Jess Mitchell. We could get this or that. And then all of a sudden, you know, it dawned on me, wait a minute, if I put myself back, you know, as the, you know, and please, no offense to anybody, I think a lot of faculty bristle at the reference to subject matter expert. It's extremely colonizing. It puts us in a box. Like, okay, you know, and I understand instructional designers don't get respect either. And so, you know, there's territory and all that other kind of stuff and expertise to be recognized. But so I was thinking, I don't want to have any outside voices coming in on this course. We're not going to get outside speakers, because when we do that, we marginalize our own faculty. I mean, I can go down, I know women in our own faculty. I know guys in our own faculty who have expertise in marginalized student populations, that have expertise in all the topics we need. And, you know, if we got to model what we want them to teach, you know, otherwise we're teaching something else. So that was the aha moment for me, and this is a big way of how to do that. So like, I want folks to teach doing open things and giving students voices.
Jim, if you can hear us, I think you cut out.
Yeah, I lost Jim too. I think
Sorry.
he's back. Jim, are you back?
You're back.
Yeah, I just got a warning. My internet connection is unstable. Well,
Don't worry, it's fast.
thank you, Comcast.
We lost you at student voices.
Yeah, so if we want them doing student voices, well, why don't we do the faculty development in a manner where we're giving the faculty, who are, in this case, the student, have them do the voices. And, so it's like I'm reading the article, I'm going, oh, that is exactly what they're saying. And here's all the research and the citations to support this, so I can go make the argument to the associate provost and all this other stuff. And so I'm getting really, really excited, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden there's a whole different way I can do this. So I guess that's why I was so excited about it.
I'm so excited that it can be that for you. Like, that's awesome. That's what it's supposed to be, right? And the thing is, I don't think it has to be this big grand thing right out the bat, right? Like right out the gate. I think you can start with a small cohort of faculty and, just do something. And I also feel like it can even be somewhat diagnostic in some regards, right? So it can be a training, but it can also give you feedback and let you know kind of where people are at, right? And so that way it's not punitive in any kind of way, but if you have people in there and some people are just really struggling, either with the technology or if they're struggling with the concepts and just feeling comfortable in those kind of environments, right away, right? And you can have, you can go to their office and maybe sit down and have a deeper conversation, invite them out to lunch, invite them out for coffee, and really kind of dig in a little bit deeper, and it just really gives you I think it gives you a case of, it just gives you an idea of where you stand.
I think from an instructional designer's perspective too, at least for me, the balance between like delivering content from, I'm going to use that terrible word, subject matter experts, and creating social learning opportunities for more peer-to-peer interaction. I've seen from like the clients that we work with, which are inevitably our, programming units or planning units, they don't fully value the social learning strategies. So it can be hard to get them to buy into those ideas because they look at it as a content delivery and they want those people communicating their expertise and their knowledge and things. So that's been a challenge for me to kind of balance those two within the course design. So I have the stakeholder support from the clients, but also kind of moving toward that more in, I'll use another bad word, innovative space, where it's more of a social learning community and a community of inquiry.
Yeah, what you mentioned, Autumn, about it being able to do it small scale, that was the other thing, and it felt really good. Is I have a colleague of mine who's MT Flamingo on Twitter, and she's set up a faculty learning community that's real small, and she wanted to actually try to do it hybrid because our huge problem is 85% of our faculty are adjunct, and they just don't have time or not around any of that stuff, and the full-timers are not consistently here at the same time, and so it's just enormous confirmation when you call on one of those pages for, can we do faculty learning communities, and basically do them hybrid. I forget how you phrased it, but use the online interconnected part. So it was great affirmation of what we're going to try to do there. But the other thing is, the first part of that faculty learning community struck me. It's on literacy, and we talked about literacy and orality. And it was interesting. Part of our discussion was it's amazing how much when you get faculty together for development, stuff like that, at least our experience with all of our faculty is they don't want to write. They just want to talk. And so it does evolve into this, it's got to be face-to-face, and it's got to be just talking. And then that really boils it down to, so you end up with a little tiny subset out of 1,200 faculty members, and and you end up with the same 5 people at a time out of the same 27 usual suspects, and everybody else is missing. But then we also miss the experience of, we expect our students to write all the time. We want them to do all this literacy, but and anyway, I haven't sorted it out. It was just exciting to read, and all the gray cells are going pop, 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 pop.
I have similar problems with getting faculty to write. But part of it, to be fair, is they're thinking that they have to write the way they write for publication. It has to be perfect, and it has to be on electronic.
Oh God, yes.
I made myself really vulnerable in one of my reflections that I shared with them that I couldn't share publicly on my blog because I was talking a lot about a particular thing that happened with my students. But I also wrote a very light one so that they could see the two.
Oh.
Because some people won't want to go that vulnerable, but I wanted to make myself vulnerable. But I also gave an example of a very light one that they could have written, a very short one too, and a very long one. They have all these options, but I talk to them when they're in front of me, and they're like, yeah, we want to reflect them.
Yeah, well, that's a great idea to do the again, model what we want them to do.
This all, and I'm reminded of some of the conversation that came up in the face-to-face meetup and annotation jam we did, and it's this tension between, like, yes, I always come back to, like, listen, patience, modeling it matters, like, just that's a valuable enough approach to just continue to model and do the things and that'll be absorbed, and over time that plays out, and that's ultimately for the better. But I'm stuck in this tension of still having this sort of urgency, and it's why I love an urgency of teachers and Sean and Jesse's work, which I think everyone here knows. I think it's much more urgent. Like I don't like the idea of just sort of being patient and modeling where we can, and I think and again, maybe this is my own, I've got to get past it, and but the times I get really excited are when I get beyond just these sort of patient modeling and really do something that feels like it's significantly sort of cracking the system in a more intentional way. And I think work like theirs through that book is represents that. I mean, the traction that got was amazing. But it's just that tension of, like, patience and modeling versus, hold on, the future's coming really quick, and those that have the ability to affect change in communities like this one that can do it need to really take bigger, broader steps than we have in the past. I don't know.
Which are what? But I'm trying to figure out, because I know Sean and Jesse work really well, and I'm not sure what it is you're alluding to.
Just that there's that tension, and that's, I don't know what that step is. For them, I thought just being very open and vulnerable about how we can take a very human approach to our work and let go of grading, and a lot of these, I guess, just that from their perspective was that sort of step that felt like it was more bold. But I'm not alluding to anything. It's just that I know that tension exists for me of, like, just kind of stay the course and model appropriately and try to make the right connections on one end, and on the other end, like, no, it needs to be more significant and more urgent.
And Taylor, to just kind of work off of that notion of tension, I'm at a STEM university, so, like, our steps have to be, it feels very small because it's engineering minded. Everything has a very specific start and a very specific end, and if you don't have grades and numbers, then everything falls apart. And so I'm trying to introduce hypothesis very slowly. So the baby steps is sometimes all that someone can handle, but that we have to make some huge leaps to keep up with what education's going to want very soon. So how do we keep doing the baby steps, stay very hopeful? Then we're talking about, I will not call it training, educating the educator, the urgency, right? And so I see this a lot. I haven't participated in any of those conversations about critical or urgent pedagogy, but it seems like some people are just going to get left behind if we don't help them keep up. Perhaps students, perhaps faculty, I'm not sure.
Can I push back on the training thing a little bit, Jim? Would that be okay?
Critical
So
friend.
I'm just gonna suggest, I don't know if we need to ban the term training, but I think we need to recognize that training is different than the kind of stuff that I think we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do need training. And training, that's fine. I think we can have a training for that. we can develop those. But think of training much more along those lines of skill development than of literacies, right?
Yes.
And I do think trainings are important, and I think we have to have them in some instances, but we also have to have language for the bigger picture side of things and the more humanistic approaches when we're dealing with larger concepts and being able to synthesize the things that we're learning in the trainings, right? The trainings are the little, like the skills of how to do these kind of things. But if that's all you can do is use a hammer to nail, right? Like you're never really going to build anything. Like you need a whole range of different skills. You need to be able to synthesize them in different ways. And that's where we need community. That's where we need connected learning. That's where we need something complex and I think beautiful in many ways. And that's not to demonize training, and that's not to demonize the skills-based stuff. I think that that's important and that it needs its place. But I would stop short of banning it, because I do think that it's important, and I think that it needs to be recognized as well. But I do think we need to recognize it for what it is, because if we don't, then it can take over.
So I kind of want to.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that I've kind of made an oversweeping statement as a way to take a position.
Well, I kind of want to jump in on that, and I'm going to put on my old librarian hat, which is gathering dust in the corner now, because I have also had a professional direction change. But when I was listening to Jim, what I heard was the example that I remember you using, Jim, was people asking for training. And kind of the classic issue of the reference librarians, that people ask for things that are not what they actually want. And as instructional designers and instructional technologists and faculty, we also all see that. But it occurs to me that, people will come in and say, can you give me WordPress training? I'm like, no. Can you give me Moodle training? The answer to that question is I don't even know what that means yet. And I think the idea that I found really interesting was in being more intentional about breaking down, are you asking me, show me where the buttons are and how to remember them quickly so that I can do this task that I understand faster or better, which is, I think, appropriately a kind of training that we continue to need to do. Or is this actually a question about, I'm unhappy with the exams and somebody told me that I could do something with Moodle that's different about exams. And really, to answer that question meaningfully, we have to start unpacking the whole course to figure out, why do you think this is the right way? And now we're into self-directed education. So that's kind of what I heard in accepting the request for training.
Yeah. Can I just say something? As you said that, you made me think of something that happened the past couple of weeks in my department. So we have people who are responsible for pedagogy and assessment, who are like the pedagogy side of instructional designers. And we have instructional technologists who are more technical in their job. They don't have to be very pedagogy oriented, but they still do a little bit of that. And we have new positions that are more instructional design that does a little bit of both. And so a couple of our instructional technologists were doing something related to WordPress, and then we're going to do something related to Hypothesis. Right? Now, I'm a faculty member, and I'm more on the pedagogy side, but I'm also very technically literate, right? I'm very digitally literate. And so when they talk about something like WordPress, I actually know WordPress better than them, even though I'm not the technical person, because I use it all the time. So I use it, and I use it in so many different ways, right? I use it for my course where I aggregate student blogs. I use it for virtually connecting. I use it for my own personal blog. And so I know a lot more of the little things that sometimes I needed to do it, so I figured out how it's done, versus the regular, this is the buttons you need to click to create a blog post and add an image to it, And with Hypothesis, I was doing a consultation with someone where on the fly I could easily realize that if you use tags and then you search the tags and you you get what you want, and this is how we do it privately, and this is how you do it if you wanted a PDF and all that. But I know this not because anyone ever trained me. I do it because I practice Hypothesis. I use it at least once a month, at least, if not more. And I was thinking about how our instructional technologists, when they want to show someone how to use it, they need to figure out what's the use case that this person wants so that they can train their students on the things that they need to know. But the instructional technologists won't know all this stuff by looking at the manual. And they won't know this stuff if they're just training someone on the basics of it. And so, well, this is the other thing, right? If with any of those things, it's about using it a lot. And you as the instructional technologist or whoever in the faculty development center might not be using it in the way that a faculty member might need to use it. And so how do you do that properly? I can do it well for the things that I use well. But if someone wants to use something that I've never used before, or that I don't use a lot.
Well, I think you make good points there, Maha, and I'd offer a similar kind of example we're experiencing. The school is also having a largely from top-down push on accessibility of course materials and other stuff like that. And there's enormous urgency from the top, but not necessarily a lot of in-depth understanding of what's required. And also, by way of background for everybody here, I'm in the Pedagogical Center for Teaching Excellence. We have a separate department called an e-learning department, which even though they're titled instructional designers, they're actually more, it's kind of the LMS department. And so there's this big push, and faculty have been going, so everybody's been talking about, well, they need training because the faculty didn't know what to do on accessibility stuff. And it's kind of started dawning on me as I've been kind of not central on it, but in the mixed and dealing with my own accessibility issues and my experience in WordPress and Word and stuff. And everything seems to be focused, and what folks have been too focused on, in my opinion, is, and this is what I mean by training, is they've been going, I've got Word docs, I need to find out, you need to tell me exactly what buttons to push and to run an accessibility checker so that I can then, and then exactly how am I supposed to react to what it says so that I can, say that my stuff is accessible and go home and sleep at night. And what I found, and then of course that becomes a problem because then they go to Excel or PDF or WordPress or WordPage, and the whole process, the procedure is different and the messages are different. And what I've found is you get a lot further if you just back up and help them understand, really, this accessibility stuff is about a handful of core digital literacy concepts like, don't think of it as you're writing for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Are you writing a structured document? Do you use headers so that the document actually reveals its structure? And once they started to understand that concept, it's like, oh, so then it's a question of, and they can begin to explore in Word, oh, so that's why I'm supposed to be using those styles at the top in Word instead of just making, a half a sentence a larger bold font. And that is then transferable because then you go over to WordPress and go, oh, well, yeah, WordPress got a drop-down menu and says headers. So I guess that's what I'm talking about, trying to educate rather than train, because the train seems like what buttons to click, and it seems, given how fast all the technology changes, doesn't have a very long half-life.
I think this touches on the concept that you guys talked about in the article, where it's capability, where we're not showing them the buttons that they have to push. We're teaching them how to look for the buttons that they need to push. And I think that the capability connection is really there in kind of what we're just talking about Photoshop and in the chat as well, and the ability to find the resources and the training that they need in order to make the right decision for their own situation versus telling them this is how you do this and that's it.
I agree 100%. And yeah, I think for me, it's just really important that we recognize both, because I do think that we need both, and we need to celebrate both in the realms where they're most helpful, right? So I'm considering a blog post about kind of this type of thing, and that's another reason why it's in my mind so much. I know we're coming up on the end, but this is kind of like, this is the thing that sort of stood out to me and made me start thinking about this. And so I don't know if you guys know who Mary Oliver is, but she's a poet, and she passed away recently. And one of her most famous poems that I love so much is called Wild Geese. And I was listening to an interview with her. She passed away, and so, like, you know, people are like celebrating her, and so somebody was replaying. It was On Being, actually. They replayed an interview with her, and she's talking about that poem, and it turns out that poem was actually, she was trying to demonstrate to a student how to deal with end stop lines. So how do you end a line in poetry? Do you end it with a period, or do you just like let it kind of dangle out there? How do you stop the end of a line? And so it you know, and the interviewer actually said, so it was a technical exercise. It was a help document, basically, right? Like this amazing poem that, like, I mean, Krista Tippett, the interviewer, at one point says, this is a poem that people have said this poem has saved lives. Like, it's an amazing poem. It was a technical exercise, right? And so I do think that those things like overlap, and that's really where they're most beautiful. They're most beautiful when they overlap and they intermingle with one another. And so I'm very interested in this this intermingling of the technical as well as the bigger picture, more human-based kind of things. And I think often we separate them, and I think they need to be separate, but at the same time, I think they need to be together at the same time. And I'm not sure how to reconcile that. It's something that I'm struggling with right now. So I know we are about 10 minutes over the top of the hour. I wanted to check in with folks and just see where we're at with time. Do we want to go for a couple more minutes, or do we want to wrap this up? I know a couple people have already kind of jumped off.
I have to go in just about 5 minutes.
Yep, and I've got to do the same, but I would be remiss not to say before I did that, that regardless of how much tension that exists within me, it's being able to connect around these sorts of amazing articles and scholarship and people and communities that are all intersecting. I'm ultimately an eternal optimist because of the ability to do that. So I don't think anyone knows the sort of network effect that happens when really deep thinking happens and it gets put out into the world via whether it's an article like yours or otherwise. So I just have like endless gratitude for what you guys put out, and yeah, can't really put into words how much that matters and means to the entire world. And I don't think that's overstating it. Like the network effect is amazing. So just thank you both for everything you're doing, and everybody in the community. I know it's not just Autumn and Maha, but you guys are a big piece of it.
It's you too, Taylor. Thank you so much for organizing the annotation and getting everybody together there in Colorado. And yeah, there's big props to the networks all around, and thank you so much for your place in it.
I'll have more time on my hands, so as these things need extra support, let me know.
All right.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Joe. I have to rush off as well. Joe, have you figured out how to stop recording?